Hello and welcome to this event, Man on a Beach, brought to you by the York Festival of Ideas, organised by the University of York. I'm Colin Philpott. I'm a member of the university's court. That's the advisory body of the university. I'm also an author, a former BBC programme maker, but actually probably more relevant than any of that in this context, quite an enthusiastic long-distance walker, and I have walked over a period of years the entire southwest coastal path. So I have a great personal interest in this subject. Now, I reckon that enjoying visiting a beach is one of those experiences which is shared by the vast majority of people, certainly among an island nation like Britain. And whenever I go to the beach, I imagine that this is something people will continue to want to do as long as humanity exists, and providing we don't destroy the planet in the meantime. And today I'm delighted to introduce you to a man who has dedicated the last decade of his life to understanding what the fascination of the beach is to people all around Britain. He's Ian Brighouse, originally from East Yorkshire actually, but now living in Cornwall, where of course there are plenty of rather nice beaches. I think he actually overlooks one where he lives. And he is the creator of Man on a Beach, a website which hosts over 1,000 short video clips where people describe why they like particular beaches, particular parts of our coastline. More than 600 different beaches are featured on the site. It's a beautiful idea, offering some great insights into something we all love to do. Ian, welcome to the York Festival of Ideas.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me, and I'm looking forward to chatting, Colin.
So just tell us how this all started. Where did you get the idea from?
Well, I suppose it's Cornwall, really. We brought the children down when they were very young in the mid-90s, and we spent a lot of time on the beach just naturally. And I noticed what I think everybody knows, that people are generally happy on the beach, as you've just mentioned. But I wanted to find out why that was. So I thought I'd investigate it. So on a wing and a prayer, I decided to visit a beach in Cornwall every day with a little mobile phone and meet a stranger and ask them one question: what does the beach mean to you? And you can imagine my trepidation when I approached the first one at Trellissick Gardens near Truro. But it went well, which surprised me. And then I'd do a scene setter with each of the interviews and take photos. And my plan at that point was to revisit each beach seasonally, so there'd be an idea of the enhancing effect of the beach on people through the year. And it was just uploaded onto YouTube. I think I was a little bit early into all of this vlogging or blogs, because I had an IT background and I was comfortable uploading films, and but it was very much ad hoc. And the more I did it, the more I really enjoyed it.
And you didn't give people any advance notice then? You literally sort of, to use the jargon, doorstepped them on the beach?
Absolutely. As you're talking to me, I can see myself approaching the first guy who was sitting by the wall at, it's called Chenolles Creek at Trellissick Gardens, and wondering whether he'd report me to the authorities.
Has anybody ever told you?
Him. Yeah.
Has anybody ever told you to get lost?
No, I've never had any rudeness, and I can count on one hand the people who've asked me not to. But I suppose as I've gone on over the years and done it more and more, I've sort of an awareness of who'd be receptive.
So how do you choose it then? So you're on a beach, there's probably loads of people. How do you decide who you're going to pick?
I sort of go into a different mode when I go onto the beach without being too odd about it. My wife felt I was doing a bit too much man on a beaching early on, and said, why don't you go and do your man on a beach at Porthcothan in Cornwall? I was only doing Cornwall for the first year, and then we'll go and have lunch afterwards. And she said, as soon as you crossed the line onto the beach, you became a stranger to me. I suppose if I looked at a group of people, it would be the person who's watching that group that I would approach, would be an example. And you just get an instinctive feel really from who has interviewed well, and sort of self-publishing publicising sort of people often don't come over as well as you think they would. Yeah, so often the shy ones. But I can't really say, really, it's intuitive.
Yeah. Before we get into a bit more of the detail of how it all works, just tell us a little bit of your backstory then. So before you moved to Cornwall, you know, what have you done with your life before you got into this?
I grew up in the East Riding of Yorkshire in a village, sort of suburby bit called Kirkella, nice part of the East Riding west of Hull. And I left there as soon as I could in 1978. It was the end of the fishing. So it wasn't as nice. I think it's really nice now. It always was nice in the East Riding, but I think Hull's really picked itself up. And then I became a teacher, secondary teacher, and I taught in Knaresborough. And then we were renting in York, funnily enough, in Fulford. And we couldn't get a mortgage on 2 teachers' salaries. So I went into IT, which was a new thing at the end of the 80s. And I became a trainer, and straight away we were able to buy our first house. So you could have 100% mortgage in those days. And we lived on what I think is now a fashionable part of York, but it wasn't so much then, Bishopthorpe Road. We lived in Richardson Street near the park. Both the children were born in York. And we decided that you'd either go to somewhere like Cornwall or the Highlands of Scotland when your children are either young or when you're old. So we took a risk. And I'd become self-employed by then, and my clients were all national. So I only had a few clients, and I rang them up and they said, yeah, instead of paying you mileage, we'll put you in a little travel inn or something, and you can go and still get paid living in Cornwall. My wife was still a teacher, so she could get a job. And that was us. And so it was going to Cornwall that really started it. And we've been there 26 years now. Yeah.
Okay.
So Yorkshire born and bred, and Cornwall made.
Adopted Cornishman. Yeah. Okay.
Blowing.
Yeah. Let's just take a little look at the site. Perhaps if you could show us the site. So this is the homepage.
Yeah, absolutely. Man on a Beach, journeys around the coast is the strapline you can see at the top. And it is significant. I wanted to make a construct who was anonymous. I wanted him or her, it could have been, to be an everyman in the traditional literary sense. And I was anxious about being known, really, mostly because I didn't have confidence in whether it would work or not. So I thought, I know what, I'll be anonymous. I'll never go in front of the camera. And let's create this guy, man on a beach, who can be reflective or representative of the people that I'm going to interview anonymously. So that's where the name comes from. And here we are, we've got menus along the top. There is on this menu here, the About Man on a Beach, the second from the left, a 6.5 minute piece to camera, which introduces the series, which I recommend if somebody was interested to get an overall idea of it more articulately than I'm explaining it. And just to quickly go through the menus, homepage, obviously here, press and links. There's been increasing attention to the series as it's developed, and particularly recently as it's become national and it covers the whole UK coast. It's considered as an archive. So I'm starting to get accolades, say from the UK Web Archive with the British Library. We jointly presented to the Oral History Society virtually last summer. And you can see that on the press and links page. And it's now one of the early digital entries to the 6 legal deposit libraries, which I'm really proud of.
Yeah, that's great. Just show us the map.
Sorry, go on.
Just show us the maps.
Certainly, yeah. The menus run along there and they're self-explanatory. Yeah. But if you scroll down a touch here, there's a UK map.
Yeah.
A Great Britain map, actually. And I've added Northern Ireland, which is separately there for the UK perspective. But all of the regional maps are here, and any of them that you click on take you to the particular beaches. So if we go into the the Britain map, you can see the 17 regions that cover the whole coast of the island. And if we were to go to Norfolk and Suffolk, let's say, you hover on it, highlight it, and then we could go into the Earl of Leicester's beach, Holcombe.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see that each beach page has a Google Maps button and information like parking, sites of special scientific interest, dog friendliness. There's a little textual preamble by season and then there's an interview. Now that's interesting because this beach is an example of people who don't like to be filmed. So the view of the beach at low tide, for those who know Holcombe, has the interviewer behind the camera, and that's quite a nice one actually, of a later life, an end of life interview.
Yeah.
And then a more conventional one below it, and scene setting film, and then a previous visit. That guy was swimming, following Roger Deakins' waterlog film, swimming the coast of Britain, and on and on.
Okay, and we'll come back and look at some of the individual ones in a bit. Yeah.
So that's how the beach pages work, and then you know, as you go back to the homepage, you can either choose to go into one of the regions or so.
Now that's great. So you must have, so you started in Cornwall, but then you must have covered a lot of miles then to get, because this is all you're there. People don't send you them sort of remotely. You are physically there when all these have been recorded. Is that how it's worked?
Yeah, absolutely. For the first year, I did a daily visit to a Cornish beach, and then I thought, where's the most opposite place I can go to? Norfolk and Suffolk, they've got skies, which we don't have so much of in Cornwall, but not so much the headlands and so on. So you can't look back at a beach very easily unless you're on Southwold Pier. You know, there's not many headlands. And then it became national. So I started with an old Mercedes 190E, and I took that from an apparent 65,000 to 175,000 miles. I now have a C-Class, more modern car, Mercedes, and that has gone from 11 to 91. So about 200,000 miles. I've been around the country at least 4 times.
Wow. And how does it, so briefly, how does the economics of all this work then? Because you must be spending quite a lot of money on it.
Yeah, everything that's been earned really has been put back into the site, other than my bills. For the first year, I sold an expensive car and got that cheap Mercedes. It was a lovely car, and I had a year's money to try it in Cornwall. And halfway through that year, I met. January the 4th, I remember it vividly, I met somebody who suggested that I should have a website and sell adverts on it, and she would buy one. She had an art gallery in Penwith in Cornwall. She's still with me. And 3 of the 5 suggestions she gave me bought adverts. So after a year, I had 38 advertisers who were paying me an annual fee, and that gave me the confidence and the wherewithal to be able to go to the first region, and it snowballed from there. There's well over 100 businesses supporting Man on the Beach now, I'm delighted to say, and I'm really proud of my connections with them because of what they've enabled me to achieve.
But one thing about the advertising, I mean, obviously that's great because it's enabled you to expand it, but the advertising isn't sort of, it's quite discreet in a way. It's not sort of, it doesn't shout at you, which is great.
No, there's no advertising on the homepage or on the maps, and there's a menu on the homepage called Supporters, which if you hover on, lets you see the supporters on each beach page. So an advertiser would have an advert on a beach page and on the regional supporters page. And they often answer the "what does the beach mean to you" question, and it sits above their supporters banner. So I think of them as owning the site in the same way as all the people who've been kind enough to share their eulogies with me.
And just one final question before we start looking at some specific examples. You alluded to this earlier. So you very much sort of had the Banksy approach when you started, didn't you, of not wanting to be known yourself. But you have changed that now. And you mentioned you've done a piece to camera to sort of explain the whole thing that's on the website. So why the anonymity in the first place, and why the change now?
I suppose hindsight's always, you've got to be careful with hindsight, haven't you? But I lacked confidence at the beginning, and I thought, as well as being a handy philosophical device, it would also mean that I wouldn't have to show myself, which sounded appealing at that time. As it got more exposed, even in Cornwall, I remember being interviewed by Radio Cornwall, my confidence built, and I had a couple of instances where I sort of felt wonderful being on the beach and doing it, and gradually, as you can imagine, as it developed into more of an archive, your confidence builds, and you want to widen awareness of it more, and that's why I'm now in front of the camera, and why I did that piece to camera. I just felt this is quite good, and I can let more people know about it, because I think it's a positive contribution.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Let's just start having a bit of a look at some of the recordings you've got, and they're all fun. You know, one of the great things about it is the diversity of them, the different types of things that people talk about, the different types of people. But let's sort of start close to home, in the sense of our home, if you like. And of course, there are many, many fine beaches on the Yorkshire coast. What are your favourites on the Yorkshire coast?
Well, when it's funny, when I think of Yorkshire, I was thinking of the people, really. Very quite forth, you know, without being caricaturing people. It's quite forthright, and it's where I'm from. So I suppose with being down here for so long, it was really nice to go back to where I'm from and be reminded of that forthright nature. But in terms of the beach side, I like Robin Hood's Bay. It's got so many different strands to it. It's picture perfect. It's got the pantile roofs and that lovely walk down the steep hill. Yeah. But it's got lots of nuances to it. So it's got the geology there, and there's a sort of strong folk music tradition there. Some sort of well-known folk people live there. And I remember seeing Steve Phillips in the Dolphin pub there once, and it's got these layers of appeal to it. And one thing that I've learned from the interviews that I've done is that the beach enhances creativity and energy levels and decision making. It's got all these different aspects to it. So I always think of the beach really as its effect on people, rather than what it necessarily looks like. And things like the geology at Robin Hood's Bay are a wonderful spin-off.
And I think one of the other ones that you mentioned to me previously was Whitby, and I think it's Yvonne who are the people who recorded Whitby. So maybe we should just have a quick listen to that one if we can, and then you can tell us about it.
Welcome back to Man on the Beach. I'm here at Tate Hill Beach in Whitby with Yvonne. Yvonne, what does the beach mean to you?
Okay. Well, I've just spent 18 months travelling around Southeast Asia, which is why I've got ridiculous trousers on. You can't beat a British beach on a day like this. I mean, anywhere in the world, and I've done a bit of travel, and nowhere in the world is it better than Britain on a day like this for beach life, you know? I mean, for example, it's not just the beach that you get in Britain. We're stood on what is possibly the oldest pier in the world. It's not just any old pier. This is over 1,000 years old, this pier, yeah? So, and you're surrounded by towns with historical value and quirkiness and gorgeousness and all these different, you know, periods mixed in together, higgledy-piggledy. That's Whitby, really. You've got so much history here. So it's not just the beach, it's where the beach is set. So to me, the beach isn't just a lot of sand and the sea. It's the town that the beach is part of.
That's a really interesting point, isn't it? And actually it illustrates something that struck me about when I looked at the site is, you know, we think about the beach, and perhaps your natural default position is to think about a sort of deserted, fairly remote beach. But we have plenty of beaches that are not like that at all. They're very built up, you know, Whitby to a certain extent, but, you know, Blackpool, Brighton, Scarborough, places like that. So it's quite a variety, isn't it? An enormous variety.
There is. And the other theme that came through from Yvonne later in that interview is the returning traveller. She mentions it at the beginning. And that kept cropping up quite a lot. There's a great nostalgic feel for beaches, which would include those urban beaches as well. And of course, the beach is a working place as well, which is one of the themes in the findings menu.
Yeah, and let's talk about that, because you've it's not just sort of the way you've approached this is not just to sort of, if you like, randomly get people to talk about the beach. You've actually thought about what they've said and tried to categorize them and come up with some conclusions. So just briefly talk us through how you've categorized people's responses to your question, because you asked them all the same question, don't you?
The question is, what does the beach mean to you? Which is the strapline on the homepage for the underneath the revolving banner. When I come home from my travels, I have an enormous spreadsheet, and I add each interview to it and add all of the points that they make. So my shortest interview, I think, is 3 seconds, peace and quiet. And my longest one is over 14 minutes. And so that was took a bit longer. And I link those to charts, which are regularly updated on the findings menu. And because there's so much, 1,336 interviews now, I split them into 6 categories. So the 6 categories are emotional and spiritual, Work and occupations is the second one. Friends and family, sensory, nature, and activities and pastimes. I think that's 6, isn't it?
Mm.
And each of those has got a chart, and each of those are updated after each trip. And it sounds quite dry, but it's interesting how common themes jump out. So there's one particular answer that's always been the most popular since day one, and that's childhood.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? That people's link back to earlier parts of their life. Yeah. So we've got some examples, not of all 6 categories, but of a few of them. So let's listen to Claire. This is from a Cornish beach, I think, and this is in your emotional category, I think. Yeah.
Welcome back to Man on a Beach. I'm here with Claire at Kingsand. Claire, what does the beach mean to you?
The beach is just wonderful. It's my daily life. I'm very lucky. I live right here, right next to the beach.
Can we have a look?
Yes. I live through that little hole in the wall, just over there. It's a tiny, tiny little place. It's smaller than my kitchen was in my last house, and there's 4 of us and a cat living in there. But it's so worth it because we just come out to this every day. And this is actually where I grew up, or it's the holiday flat of where I grew up. And I've moved abroad. I've lived all over the world, in the Philippines and Venezuela and Spain for 6 years because my husband's Spanish, and I just had to come back. I wanted my kids to have the upbringing that I had. And for me personally, when I was living in Spain, we were in the mountains, 4.5 hours drive away from the sea, and I just felt so claustrophobic. I just need this. It's sort of in my blood, I think. You know, you're just used to this wide expanse of ever-changing colour and texture. I mean, you look at it today, you wouldn't believe what it was like a couple of days ago when it was like winter. We were having huge storms, the sea was smashing up against the village here, kayaks being washed away, and now it's like the Mediterranean, you know. It changes every day, every few minutes really, as the clouds go over. The sea can wash up anything. My kids are avid beachcombers. They come walking home from school across the beach every day, pick up incredible stuff.
Well, what's interesting about Claire, of course, is that theme of the returning traveller again that we saw with Yvonne, but also the sort of timelessness of the beach. That there's a lovely mention there of the car keys that get washed around the bay. Someone loses them, and then months later they're found at a completely different part of the beach. And that sense of timelessness of the beach, I think, comes through with her. She's got a very strong emotional link to it. That she lives right by where she was standing there, and had moved there. And she went to live in Spain. So there's a really recurrent theme of people coming back. And that sort of sheds light on us as island people, I think. It did end up as a sort of celebration of us as island people.
Now, of course, we often tend to think about the beach as a place of leisure. It's where, you know, you spend some of your spare time. But of course, for quite a lot of people, it's their working environment. It's their workplace. And a really good example of that, I think, is Tony from Fleetwood. Let's just hear a bit of Tony.
We operate the 250-mile radius, and I say we help everyone. You know, we're flank stations for Blackpool and Morecambe. They've got the D-class lifeboats and the Atlantic, and I say we've rescued kite surfers, swimmers, yachts, fishing boats, and we're around call 24/7.
And you have a relationship with the beach in your other life with the fishing previously, don't you?
Yeah. I was a fisherman. I was skipper for 30 years on the inshore fishing, and fished round our coast as far as right up to Fraserburgh, what you was on about before. I've been in and out of Fraserburgh, right round onto North Sea to North Shields, fished on the Irish side and Cork and in Northern Ireland, Belfast, Bangor, and right down to Wales, Conway, Fishguard.
And there's a great sense of duty with him. He was really light-hearted and a really good laugh, so to speak, you know, off camera. And we had a great chat. But you can see there's a sort of depth to him, really. And that's a great affinity to the coast, which is more than just a job, I think, through those two guises of his life.
Yeah, so it is a workplace, but it's a workplace that, you know, you still got an emotional connection to.
Yeah, it's lethal there, absolutely lethal at Morecambe Bay, and that's one of the most tricky coasts to sort of monitor from a duty point of view. It's very similar to Jeff at Rossilli, Llangennith Beach, which I think you're going to reference for the activities in a moment.
Yeah, let's move on to Jeff, because yeah, again, a common theme of this is, you know, what do people actually use the beach for, and what do they do on the beach? And Jeff, who you mentioned from the Welsh coast, is a good example of that. So let's just watch Jeff.
Welcome back to Man on a Beach. I'm here with Jeff at Worm's Head by Rossilli Beach on the Gower Peninsula. Jeff, what does the beach mean to you?
The beach to me personally is a way of life. I'm originally from London area, and I discovered this back in the 60s. Not particularly the view that we have now, which is the Worm's Head Peninsula, but just around the corner we've got the fabulous Rossilli Beach, or Llangennith as it's known to most of the surfers who come in from the village of Llangennith at the other end of the beach. And I spent maybe 40 years surfing on that beach with the associated way of life. And reaching a certain age when I maybe thought I could still surf, but really I couldn't. And I decided that I'd like to give something back. And so I've joined NCI, and we help to keep an eye on people that come down to the beach and around the rocks and the headland, and look after people that also maybe would like to enjoy it for themselves.
You know, when I look at that, as soon as you mention a beach or a person, it's just like I'm with them again. And what happens on all of these, because they're unsolicited, it's most strange to me as well, is there's a really, really strong connection that you make. And you can see that lots of them, this idea has just been sprung on them. And there's a sort of wry grin with a lot of the interviewees. And I feel it as well. And I feel a really strong connection. And I felt it as soon as I saw him. I haven't seen it for ages, that film. And you're there. And you just mentioned any beach to me, and I'm with that person. Yeah. And we often say before we film, I won't see you again. I'm only after your first name, and you own the site now. And so this is a record of us as island people, and we're all just spiritually connected. It's quite lovely to be part of it. I feel part of it rather than it being mine.
And I think one thing actually that illustrates as well is that I think this has probably benefited from the fact that you don't give people too much time to think about it. So you are getting an instinctive response,
maybe, yeah,
rather than a rehearsed one. Yeah,
hadn't thought about that. Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah. If you said to me, I'll come and interview you tomorrow about what beach you like, I'd be thinking about it, and it might not be as natural and as, you know, as good as what in the way in fact you've done it, which is great. Do you think there's something about the British relationship with the beach because we're an island? I mean, if you went and asked the same question of people on coastlines elsewhere, do you think you get the same sort of response?
I think we would in some places. There was a commercialisation in a tourist context in the Victorian era, wasn't there? And it took so many people who'd never been exposed to the beach. And I think this repetitive theme that comes up of a reference point through generations perhaps started about then. Other than, I mean, I can think of other examples like the oyster pickers at Whitstable in North Kent. That's a really long-standing relationship from a working point of view with the beach. But for the tourism, I think a lot of it comes from Victorian times, and the railways as well, which gave people access to these wonderful beaches. I'm thinking of St Ives, a special branch line over past Carbis Bay, you know where the G7 was.
And to a certain extent, the beach, as we understand it, is a sort of was an invention of the railways, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The tourism side of it, I think, and people often forget that it's a vital income, particularly in places like the Highlands and the Southwest and parts of Norfolk and Suffolk. It's a vital part of the economy, and it is very much a workplace, that leisure and tourism side of it. Yeah.
I mean, obviously there are examples, aren't there, of in lots of beaches where there's tension between people who've got a different vision of what the beach is for. So you'll get people who are surfing or whatever on a beach, which may not please other people who just want it to be a quieter place. I mean, have you come across that?
Yeah, certainly have. Sadly, more recently than in the early stages of the series or project or whatever it is. It's perhaps reflective of other things that people feel a little bit more polarized now in their position on things like on anything really. Examples might be as I'm thinking of a surf lifesaver. They have surf life-saving clubs in Cornwall, including junior versions called nippers, where people are encouraged to learn how to be lifeguards and so on. And it's very much a sort of community-based thing. I interviewed a surf lifesaver at Porthtowan who was monitoring the beach as I was talking to him, and there were motorbikes on the beach, and he was saying, "Oh, they're just taking it easy. That's all right with me." But you could see that there was, in a nice sense of the word, there was a proprietorial element to his long-term lifelong relationship with that beach as part of it. And it does tie into duty as well. I think it's a nice proprietorial relationship that most people have with the beach. And so I suppose sometimes you're going to feel insecure when people come in and are at ease and enjoying themselves and they're on their holidays. Yeah.
Let's listen to another example. This is Sarah, and I think it's on Skinnick Beach, which is in the north of Scotland. And this is an example, I think, you put it in your category of sensory response. And there's a lot of this, isn't it? People's sensory and indeed almost spiritual response to the beach. Let's just listen to a bit of Sarah.
Welcome back to Man on a Beach. I'm here at Talmine Bay, Skinnick Beach in Sutherland, and I'm with Sarah. Sarah, what does the beach mean to you?
For me, it's being alive and very freeing the spirit away from all the modern things of life. You can come up here and swim in the sea and just float around. I was swimming with a seal the other day, came up to say hello. The next day was some fish that came up to say hello. And the sand here has got lots and lots of glitter in it because of the rocks, which means that when you've walked into the sea and you've stirred up the sand under your feet, you're actually swimming in glitter. And it really does look like somebody's emptied a pot of Christmas glitter into the sea. And the sun was shining so brightly the other day, and the sea is so clear here that you could actually see the patterns of the waves on the sand. So it was a very magical and peaceful experience just floating about in it. And even when it's stormy here, just standing out in the wind and the waves crashing around you is just amazing. It's very, very peaceful, very restorative. It's wonderful.
Yeah, and quite a lot of response similar to that, I think you've had, haven't you?
Absolutely. Quite fashionable now. Cold water swimming crops up quite a lot. People who enjoy the sensory nature of it. I remember interviewing a lady at Lyme Regis in Dorset, the west side of Dorset, who explained to me that cetaceans like to come in close to the sea because there are these endorphins that are released. So as well as sensory, there's a well-being element within that sensory reaction to being by the sea. And so many times I've walked onto beaches and I've seen people staring out at the horizon or just staring into the middle distance. And when I've asked them what they're doing, they often said, "I don't know." It's just a sense of being lost in time and place in this wonderful place where the air, land and sea meet. As I'm talking, I'm thinking of an interview at Cove Hythe in Suffolk, which really eulogizes a passive relationship with nature and the sea and its power and being part of something. And the idea that if you can learn to be passive in your relationship to nature, you'll start to belong more within it. And that's a lovely interview. That's another Sarah at Cove Hythe, if you want to do that, perhaps.
What is the future for this project? I mean, are you going to carry on gathering more tips?
It's endless. it's endless, never stop. It's become part of me. I'm itchy when I'm at home, and I want to go home when I'm away. So that's where I live. I live in this half-life between the two, and I can't imagine not visiting beaches. Every day when I'm at home, I walk across 2 beaches with the dog first thing in the morning, and that constantly reminds me that there's always another beach. And of course, there is always another beach. So I just added 2 beaches in Yorkshire recently, Manonabeach Gap and Freysthorpe, which I used to visit as a child from Kirkkellet. And it was wonderful to add those to the South Filey Bay and near Bridlington. And added a new beach on Arran, Lamlash, only recently as well, Lamlash Bay, where the Vikings used to hide their boats. So the series is endless, thank goodness. I can always even go back to the beaches I visited by season. I calculated at one point that I'd be 86 when I'd been around the ones I'd done, but I'm still adding new ones. So now I feel like I'm like picked up and sort of taken to these places. I feel I'm part of it. You know, I've got a job to do type of thing, which is really lovely.
So you've asked over 1,000 people this question, so obviously I've got to ask you the question. You know, what does the beach mean to you? What is your overall conclusion? You know, from
I suppose it's like my top 10, isn't it? It'll be different every day. I suppose freedom. I love the idea that the beach, other than technically, isn't owned or doesn't feel owned by anybody. And the idea that everybody's one on the beach with whoever they're with or whoever they meet. And of course, that's what I've been doing, meeting people. I don't feel any sense of hierarchy or authority when I'm on the beach, and I find that really liberating. So freedom, which is a lovely wide brief, would be the first answer. The other thing I mentioned, regular walks when I'm at home, is the ever-changing nature of the beach. The beach and its relationship to the sea and the sky. You often on an ebb tide on a flat beach, we've got some flat beaches around here, you see the sky in the beach. So when you're walking along, you feel like you're in a sort of circular bowl. And that's a massive sensory reaction. You get lost in time and space. And that's magical. So the ever-changing nature, obviously conventionally the seasons as well, and the birds and the blossoms, and you start to learn the rhythms of nature as well. So it's, from a personal point of view, it's been very liberating. Coming from a sort of suburban, urban, young life to become more sensitized to this wonderful place where the air, land and sea meet. So I think people will always love the beach.
And I'm going to put you on the spot as well also and ask you which is your favourite. And I'm sure you have many favourites and you've enjoyed speaking to everybody you've spoken to, but if you had to select one favourite clip, I believe it's from Scotland, let's just listen to this. Nina, yeah, from, is it Linklet Bay?
It is my most northerly beach. Yeah.
Your most northerly beach. Let's just hear a flavour of that.
We're not spiritually connected to the ocean. I mean, we are, but that's not what I mean. We're materially the ocean and everything in it. And I remember seeing in Alaska one time an octopus washed up on the beach dead. A giant Pacific octopus. It's the largest in the world. Big red monster. And I watched it every day get devoured by these sea stars with 24 legs, this big, called sunflower stars. Pycnopodia helianthoides, big monsters. Dozen of these things, suckers on suckers, you know, eating the flesh of this dead octopus, making it into live sea star. They were healthy ones, by the way. And then I saw a family of bald eagles that had a nest right above the beach, and 3 eaglet chicks, which is a lot, come down and pick dead octopus meat and carry it up to the nest and feed it to their chicks. I got a video of it. It's very special to me. And then I saw the eagles from then on as octopus, because they were. And it's beautiful to notice those things. But I think it's scary too, because we don't take care of those entanglements like we should. So that's what the beach is to me. I am the beach.
That's quite a different one, really.
Yeah, she does 3 on that page. We were walking down to film that one from an RSPB centre on North Ronaldsay down a lane, And she said, hang on a minute, turn your camera on. These dry stone walls. And she talked for ages about the lichen and the relationships of the lichen and the seasons there. And then when I'd done that interview with her just now that you saw, she said, oh, I'm going to do my yoga now. And I said, oh, I'll go and have a walk along the beach and see what else I can see. And there was a rock pool there, and I told her about it. So she said, oh, turn the camera on again. So we had to go back down to the rock pool, and she explained it in the context of a rainforest. And so there's 3 lovely films on that beach page, which were all orchestrated by Nina, not me.
Mm. And so a final question really, which is, I mean, people get to hear about this and look at it. Some people might think, oh, you know, there's a lovely beach that I know that Ian hasn't featured yet. I mean, people can get in touch with you proactively if they want, presumably, and suggest it. Is that doable?
Yeah, I'd love it if they did. Many people have. There's a menu called Guest Answers where I've put films that people have sent in, and on that menu, which is on the homepage, Send Your Answer, there's an email address, and you could use something like Google Drive to send me a video that you've made answering a question. Hello, Man on the Beach. I'm Fred at Whitley Bay. This is what the beach means to me. But actually, a lot of people have sent textual answers in, and even poems. I had on the Press and Links page, there's a couple of lovely audio poems from Findhorn Bay in Moray in the northeast Scotland region. But when they send in the textual question, I only publish their first name, and they're in the comments section below each of the beaches. So when you're looking at a beach page, scroll right down to the bottom and you'll see some answers that people have been kind enough to send in. I suppose if I look forward with Man on a Beach, it would be great if it changed from being me to it being a place where people shared answers all around the world. The series is seen in 160 countries, and it's really popular in the Celtic diaspora, so North America, Australia, New Zealand. And I always sort of dream that I'll disappear and there'll be this wonderful exchange of beach eulogies, which might, for example, inform your earlier question about what people use the beach for. So maybe somebody cutting up a boat on the beach in Bangladesh could talk to Nina with her Oregon, sort of Seattle-based naturalistic educator approach to the beach, and that would reinforce and celebrate this wonderful place and its diverse celebration of us as an interdependent species with the rest of nature. We need to be passive in our relationship to nature to be able to thrive and be happy.
I mean, it's been fascinating talking to you, Ian, and may Man on a Beach, with or without you, go from strength to strength in years to come. Thank you very much. It's been a fascinating chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Best wishes.